Certain cars defy conventional norms. Some are too fast, others too hazardous, and some too unconventional for public roads. These vehicles didn't just face disapproval from authorities, many were outright prohibited. Today, I'll take you through 15 extraordinary cars that were banned from driving on the streets, each with its own unique story of why it was deemed too extreme or problematic for road use. Number 1. The TVR Tuscan Speed 6, a raw, reckless British rebel banned from America. Few brands embraced raw danger like TVR. Based in Blackpool, England, TVR built cars with outrageous power-to-weight ratios, wild designs, and zero electronic driver aids. Among its models, the TVR Tuscan Speed 6 stands out as an analog monster so extreme it was effectively banned from U.S. roads. Introduced in 1999 under owner Peter Wheeler, who believed electronic aids made drivers lazy and airbags were for the faint-hearted, the Tuscan was a deliberate rejection of modern safety norms. It embodied a fearless, driver-centric philosophy that regulators found impossible to approve. Its heart was a 3.6-liter inline-six engine developed entirely in-house, a rarity for a small manufacturer, delivering roughly 360 horsepower in standard form. Later versions, including the Red Rose and S models, exceeded 400 horsepower, weighing less than 2,500 pounds due to composite bodywork and minimalist design. The Tuscan matched Ferrari 360 Modena's power-to-weight ratio, but offered none of the refinement or safety. Its sci-fi styling included exposed circular headlights, tail lights set inside metallic tubes, and a dashboard that resembled a billet of aluminum art. The speedometer was digital, the starter concealed, and the doors had no external handles, requiring a hidden button beneath the side mirror to open. The car was banned because it lacked airbags, ABS, traction control, and failed U.S. crash tests. TVR refused to comply, believing that crashes were the driver's fault and electronics merely offered false security. Without crash testing, emission certification, or a redesign, the Tuscan never legally reached the U.S. market. Any examples that arrived were illegal to drive unless under the show or display exemption. Despite, or perhaps because of, this, the Tuscan developed a cult following. It appeared in films like Swordfish and TV's Top Gear, earning a reputation as the automotive equivalent of base jumping, thrilling, dangerous, and not for the faint of heart. It was the dream of drivers who felt modern cars had grown too tame and predictable. Though TVR has struggled to revive itself, the Tuscan Speed 6 remains its most infamous creation, a brutal, beautiful machine too wild to be legal in America. Number 2. The Bugatti Chiron Supersport 300. Too fast and too rare for America. The Bugatti Chiron Supersport 300 stunned the automotive world in 2019 by becoming the first production car to surpass 300 miles per hour, reaching 304.773 miles per hour on a German test track. Powered by an 8-liter quad-turbo W16 engine producing over 1,570 horsepower, the Supersport 300 featured aerodynamic tweaks like a lengthened rear diffuser and modified gearbox to maximize speed. But despite this engineering marvel, the car was never sold in the United States. Bugatti built just 30 Supersport 300 Plus models, each costing nearly $4 million. The reason they were banned on U.S. roads boiled down to safety and regulatory compliance. Though based on the regular Chiron, which is street legal in the U.S., the Supersport required significant changes to reach its record speed. The electronic speed limiter was removed, the rear bodywork extended, and fixed aerodynamic parts added. These alterations, however, caused the headlights and taillights to fall short of U.S. Department of Transportation standards for brightness, angle, and spacing. Fixing these issues would have demanded costly crash testing, emission certification, and navigating complex regulations, all for a very limited run of already sold cars. Bugatti chose not to undertake this, declaring the Supersport 300 Plus illegal for U.S. roads. American buyers could own one only if stored abroad or imported under strict non-operational exemptions like the show or display law. which limits mileage and imposes registration conditions. As of 2024, no Supersport 300 Plus has been officially registered for street use in the US, making it one of the rare modern hypercars banned not due to danger, but because it was simply too fast, too expensive, and too niche to certify. This car represents extremes, not just in velocity, but in the gap between engineering ambition and regulatory reality. It exists outside bureaucracy, and in the US, that means it remains off-limits. Number 3. The Caparo T1, a Formula One racer in disguise, banned from the road. When the Caparo T1 appeared in 2006, it looked like a Formula One car that had accidentally rolled out of the pit lane and onto a public street. This wasn't far from the truth. Designed by engineers with McLaren F1 experience, the T1 was a no-compromise weapon chasing extreme downforce, ultra-lightweight, and blistering lap times with zero regard for comfort, usability, or legal standards. Its goal was simple: to deliver F1-level performance with a license plate, but the result was so extreme and difficult to handle that multiple countries banned it from public roads. The specs were staggering: a 3.5-liter naturally aspirated V8 spinning to over 10,000 RPM, producing 570 horsepower. Weighing only about 1,100 pounds thanks to extensive carbon fiber use, it boasted a power-to-weight ratio exceeding 1,000 horsepower per ton, outclassing even the Bugatti Veyron and Koenigsegg Agera. The T1 accelerated from 0 to 60 miles per hour in just 2.5 seconds, reached 100 miles per hour in under 5 seconds, and topped out at 205 miles per hour. All while generating aerodynamic downforce capable of theoretically driving it upside down in a tunnel. But street driving revealed its flaws. No airbags, no ABS, no traction control, and a suspension so stiff that potholes could damage it. Tires had to be heated to racing temperatures for grip, and the cramped cockpit resembled a fighter jet's. Getting in and out required removing the steering wheel and contorting the body. Owners who shelled out over 200,000 pounds soon found the T1 was almost unusable outside perfect weather and closed tracks. It needed a pit crew to warm up, couldn't idle without overheating, scraped on road debris, and was so loud that noise regulations in many cities prevented registration. Attempts to fix these issues came too late, and by 2012, Caparo collapsed under lawsuits and dwindling sales, producing only a few dozen cars. The T1 remains a unicorn, a race car with a license plate, built to extreme specs, but ultimately unsuitable and banned from public roads. Number 4. The Dodge Tomahawk, too fast to ever be legal. Debuting at the 2003 North American International Auto Show, the Dodge Tomahawk wasn't merely a motorcycle, it was a radical statement challenging the very notion of what a street-legal machine could be. With 4 wheels, a handcrafted aluminum frame, and the monstrous V10 engine borrowed from the Dodge Viper, the Tomahawk embodied Chrysler's uncompromising vision of a futuristic superbike, assuming laws, physics, and common sense didn't apply. The most jaw-dropping claim was that the Tomahawk could reach speeds up to 400 miles per hour. While this figure was never officially verified on the road, it was enough to get the vehicle banned everywhere before it even moved. Under the hood sat an 8.3-liter V10, delivering 500 horsepower through a chassis supported by 4 wheels, 2 front and 2 rear. This setup looked like a motorcycle but was technically a quadricycle, though no regulations existed for such a machine. Riders perched atop the engine like jockeys gripping minimalist handlebars with their feet dangerously close to the scorching exhaust. There were no electronic safety systems, no crash protection, no license plate, no VIN, and no mirrors. Dodge never attempted crash testing or emissions certification. Still, 9 of these wild machines were built, each selling for $555,000 via Neiman Marcus catalogs or direct order, as rolling sculptures, not road vehicles. Buyers knew they couldn't legally drive them on public roads. Rumors flew about the 400-mile-per-hour top speed, but experts agree that was purely theoretical. Without aerodynamic fairings or stabilizing features, controlling this beast at anything above 150 to 200 miles per hour would be nearly impossible. The immense torque, 1,500-pound weight, and zero rider protection pushed the Tomahawk past the edge of thrill and into sheer madness. 2 decades later, the Tomahawk remains one of the most outrageous vehicles ever created, permanently banned by the unyielding forces of physics and practicality. Number 5. The Mercedes-Benz CLK GTR, too extreme for the street. At first glance, the Mercedes-Benz CLK GTR appears to be a race car wearing a license plate, because it basically is. Created for the FIA GT1 racing series in the late 1990s, it emerged during a brief era when manufacturers had to build street-legal versions of their race cars to satisfy FIA homologation rules. Mercedes didn't do this halfway. If they had to produce a road car, it would be almost identical to their track weapon. The result was one of the most powerful, rarest, and most outrageous street-legal cars ever made. Yet in many countries, it was effectively banned from road use due to its extreme design and engineering. Under the hood was a 6.9-liter naturally aspirated V12, delivering 612 horsepower and over 570 pound-feet of torque.
You're aware you've got a big engine behind you, but actually, it stays surprisingly flat.
The chassis was a carbon fiber monocoque with carbon body panels, paired with a 6-speed sequential manual gearbox. The suspension was lifted directly from the race car, the interior stripped to essentials, and the doors were butterfly style. The entire silhouette looked more like a spaceship than a street vehicle. Built by HWA, the company founded by AMG co-founder Hans Werner Aufrecht, the road car retained nearly all aerodynamic features of its race counterpart, including a massive rear wing, ultra-low ride height, and minimal ground clearance. It could sprint to 60 miles per hour in just over 3 seconds and hit a top speed of 214 miles per hour, numbers that still impress today. But the problem was that the CLK GTR wasn't made for public roads. Its suspension travel was barely enough for smooth racetracks, let alone the bumps and potholes of city streets. It failed to meet emission standards in many countries, including the US. Its visibility, braking balance, and turning radius were all compromised by its race-first design. Mercedes produced only 25 road cars, 20 coupes, and 5 roadsters, and none were certified for US sale. For years, they were banned from import entirely in the US. Even in Europe, classification was difficult. Its ride height and tire clearances violated pedestrian safety laws. Headlights didn't comply with standards, and some jurisdictions refused to recognize the cars as production vehicles, since Mercedes hand-built them in tiny batches for select collectors. Most CLK GTRs now live in private collections, driven rarely and maintained meticulously. A handful appear on racetracks for demonstrations, but they're seldom seen on public roads, not just because of rarity, but because many places simply don't permit them. In 2022, one CLK GTR sold at auction for nearly $10 million, cementing its status as one of the most valuable Mercedes ever. Despite its pedigree, power, and engineering, the CLK GTR remains an outlaw, built for racing but only masquerading as a road car. Number 6. The Porsche 959, banned in America until Bill Gates stepped in. The Porsche 959 stands as one of the most technologically advanced sports cars ever built, not just in its era but in automotive history as a whole. Developed in the early 1980s as a Group B rally contender, the 959 was a full decade ahead of its time. Featuring a twin-turbocharged flat-six engine, cutting-edge all-wheel drive, a 6-speed transmission, a Kevlar-reinforced composite body, and adjustable suspension, it could hit 0 to 60 miles per hour in 3.6 seconds and reach a top speed of 197 miles per hour by the mid-1980s. Yet despite these extraordinary credentials, the 959 was banned from American roads. It wasn't because of emissions or crash safety concerns, nor any inherent danger. The 959 simply did not fit into US regulatory categories, and Porsche never planned to certify or sell it in the United States. The saga began in 1986 when Porsche began limited production of the car. Only 292 were ever made, all destined for Europe, Japan, or markets with more flexible regulations. Porsche viewed the 959 as a technological showcase, not a mass-market model, so it was never crash-tested or altered to meet U.S. Environmental Protection Agency requirements. This left wealthy collectors, including Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates and Oracle's Larry Ellison, with prized vehicles they could not register or legally drive in the U.S. For nearly a decade, these cars sat unused in storage, technically illegal under American law. The reason was frustratingly simple. Under U.S. federal motor vehicle safety standards, vehicles must pass crash and emissions tests or qualify for narrow exemptions. The 959 was too rare to fall under standard exemptions and met none of the criteria. In the mid-1990s, Gates and other collectors lobbied Congress to create a legal pathway for such historically significant vehicles. The result was the 1999 Show or Display Rule, allowing limited road use of certain non-compliant cars if approved by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and restricted to no more than 2,500 miles annually. The Porsche 959 became one of the first vehicles cleared under this rule, finally allowing owners to register and drive their cars under strict conditions. Eventually, after 25 years, the 959 also became legal under the 25-year exemption, enabling unrestricted importation for cars made before 1990. But for over a decade, it was banned, not due to safety or emissions issues, but because Porsche declined to invest millions to certify a tiny production run for the U.S. market. The 959 story became a symbol of how bureaucracy can keep even the most brilliant machines off American roads, requiring the intervention of one of the world's wealthiest men and legislative change to free it. Number 7. The Lotus Elise Series 1, too light and too illegal for America. In the late 1990s, when performance cars were becoming heavier, packed with electronics, and growing more complex, a small British firm introduced a radically different machine. The Lotus Elise Series 1, revealed in 1996, was a stripped-down roadster focused entirely on driving purity. It discarded everything unnecessary to create a lightweight, engaging experience that quickly became legendary. However, in the United States, this car was completely banned. At its core was an innovative extruded aluminum chassis bonded with aerospace adhesives rather than welded, giving it exceptional rigidity and minimal weight. Weighing just 725 kilograms, around 1,600 pounds, the Elise was powered by a modest 1.8-liter Rover K-Series engine, producing approximately 118 horsepower. Yet, thanks to its featherweight construction, it could sprint from 0 to 60 miles per hour in under 5.5 seconds and handle with the nimbleness of a go-kart. Often outcornering much more powerful rivals. The Elise focused on purity above all else. There was no power steering, traction control, ABS, or air conditioning unless specifically ordered. Inside, the cabin was bare metal and plastic. Drivers sat low in fixed bucket seats, shifting through a mechanical notchy gearbox, while the clutch demanded commitment. The ride was raw and direct, transmitting every detail of the road beneath. Yet, it never felt crude. Rather, it was a precise, connected experience. But this laser-focused approach came with costs. The Series 1 failed to meet U.S. crash safety standards. Without airbags, side impact protection, or emissions compliance, it could not be legally sold in America. Lotus recognized this and chose not to pursue costly redesigns, accepting the Elise S1 as a forbidden prize for U.S. enthusiasts. Still, some managed to import a handful under track-only or limited exemptions. It wasn't until 2004 that Lotus finally introduced the Elise to the U.S. market, this time thoroughly re-engineered to meet federal requirements. The U.S. Spec Series 2 swapped to a Toyota engine, included airbags, ABS, and reinforced impact zones. Heavier but compliant, it still delivered a brilliant driving experience and enjoyed reasonable success. Yet for true fans, the Series 1 remains the ultimate icon, the car Lotus always intended to make, embodying founder Colin Chapman's mantra, simplify, then add lightness. It never compromised, it never apologized, it simply wasn't legal, and perhaps that is exactly why it became so coveted. Number 8. Lamborghini Strosek Diablo, too radical to be legal. The Lamborghini Diablo was already a symbol of excess, a 200-mile-per-hour Italian supercar that reshaped the definition of performance in the 1990s. But for those craving something even more aggressive and visually intimidating, German tuner Vittorio Strosek offered an answer: the Strosek Diablo. This version was so extreme in design and disregard for safety norms that several countries banned it from road registration, including parts of Europe and the United States. The Strosek Diablo radically transformed the standard Diablo's look. It featured entirely new bodywork with smaller recessed projector headlights, a reshaped rear wing that sat low and smooth, and dramatically enlarged side intakes that flowed into aggressive aerodynamic channels. Though this gave the car a futuristic, sleek silhouette, it violated nearly every visibility regulation in developed countries. Many nations, including the US, mandated physical side mirrors with specific reflective areas and angles. The Strosek's replacement of these with cameras was illegal at the time, decades before digital mirrors were accepted. Other modifications caused concern too. The altered aerodynamics created dangerous rear lift at high speeds, reportedly destabilizing the car above 180 miles per hour. Its taillights and front indicators failed to meet Department of Transportation lighting standards. Inside, the stripped-out cabin lacked airbags, emission controls, and safety reinforcements required by law. Because of these issues, Germany, Switzerland, the UK, and the US refused to register the Strosek Diablo for street use unless it was reverted to factory specifications. Even Lamborghini distanced itself from these conversions, warning that such aftermarket modifications voided warranties and could render the car uninsurable. Despite the controversy, the Strosek Diablo remains a rare collectible, a wild relic from a tuner era when the rules were bent and mirrors were optional. It captures a moment when imagination outpaced regulation, even if only for a few hundred kilometers before being banned. Number 9. Ferrari F50 GT, banned by Ferrari before racing began. When Ferrari creates a race car, it commands attention worldwide. But when Ferrari builds a race machine so extreme that it refuses to let it compete, you know something extraordinary has occurred. Such was the fate of the Ferrari F50 GT, a hyper-specialized evolution of the already wild F50 supercar. Designed for a now-defunct GT1 racing series, the F50 GT never saw competition and was effectively banned from both track and street by Ferrari itself. The standard F50, released in 1995, was a showcase of Formula One technology adapted for the road. It packed a 4.7-liter naturally aspirated V12 based on Ferrari's 1990 F1 engine, delivering 520 horsepower at a screaming 8,500 RPM. No turbos, no ABS, and a carbon fiber chassis made it one of the rawest Ferraris since the 288 GTO. Only 349 were built, all hand-assembled, as close to race cars as Ferrari dared offer on public roads. Behind the scenes, Ferrari worked on the F50 GT, a race-only machine for the GT1 class. Stripped down and ruthless, it featured a 740 horsepower engine, a giant rear wing, fixed race suspension, wider tires, a sequential gearbox, and a completely gutted interior. Weighing just 2,000 pounds, 600 less than the road car, it could accelerate to 60 miles per hour in under 3 seconds. On Ferrari's test track, it outpaced the company's own Formula One car from a few years earlier. However, the GT1 class collapsed under the weight of manufacturers flooding the series with near-race cars, like McLaren, Mercedes, and Porsche. Ferrari chose not to join this arms race and canceled the F50 GT program after only 3 cars were built. Even more unusually, Ferrari forbade converting these cars for road use. This rare level of manufacturer control makes the F50 GT unique. It was so advanced and raw it never raced, and Ferrari barred it from the street as well. All 3 surviving F50 GTs are now in private collections, 2 in the US, 1 in Europe. Occasionally, they make appearances at exclusive events or private test days, roaring down tracks with all the fury of a race car that never raced. Yet they remain inaccessible to the public. not due to government bans, but because Ferrari itself chose to keep them off the road. Number 10. Nissan Skyline GT-R R34, a legend illegal on American roads. For countless enthusiasts, especially those rooted in tuner culture or raised on racing games and Fast and Furious films, the Nissan Skyline GT-R R34 is a true icon. It isn't merely a car, it's a technological masterpiece, a cult favorite, and one of Japan's most revered performance machines. Yet, in the United States, the R34 carries another distinction. It's illegal. Despite its performance and cultural cachet, the R34 was never officially certified or sold by Nissan in the US and was banned from American roads for years. Produced between 1999 and 2002, the R34 was the fifth and final GTR generation before the R35. Officially, it produced 276 horsepower under Japan's Gentleman's Agreement, but real-world estimates place it closer to 330 horsepower. This analog powerhouse featured advanced digital displays showing boost pressure, G-forces, and lap times, telemetry unheard of at the time. Yet, it failed to meet US safety standards, and Nissan had no intention to sell it stateside. American fans had to rely on workarounds like the show or display exemption, or registered importers certified to convert foreign cars to US specs. One company, Motorex in California, attempted this, but soon found itself embroiled in scandal. By 2006, Motorex faced investigations for certifying vehicles that hadn't undergone proper modifications or crash tests. Only certain R33s were officially crash tested. The R34 never passed these rigorous tests, yet Motorex kept certifying them. Consequently, from production through 2024, when the earliest models reached 25 years old, importing an R34 was risky. Custom seizures, vehicle impoundments, and even destruction of non-compliant cars were common. For over 2 decades, the R34 was essentially a black market prize, accessible only through risky imports or limited track use. Its forbidden status only increased its allure. When the 25-year rule finally applied in 2024, enthusiasts could legally import the R34 without modifications, though some states still require inspections. The R34's legacy as a forbidden gem persists, a car that defied borders, laws, and logic, becoming legendary because of what it couldn't legally be. Number 11. The Hummer H1 Alpha, too massive and polluting for Europe. The Hummer H1 Alpha traces its roots directly to the military Humvee, a rugged vehicle built for battlefields but later unleashed on public roads in a bold, if controversial, move. Initially designed as a utilitarian vehicle for the U.S. Armed Forces, the Humvee morphed into a civilian model during the early 1990s, fueled partly by Arnold Schwarzenegger's endorsement and a surge in demand for oversized military-inspired vehicles. The H1 Alpha was the pinnacle of this line. A 6.6-liter Duramax diesel powerhouse, overbuilt, excessively wide, and heavy beyond reason. Straight away it clashed with Europe's stringent environmental and size regulations. Only about 729 H1 Alphas were produced, each boasting off-road features like portal axles, enormous ground clearance, permanent four-wheel drive, and central tire inflation systems. It could scale vertical obstacles up to 22 inches, wade through 30 inches of water, and endure collisions that would disable most SUVs. However, the beast weighed close to 8,000 pounds, was wider than most parking spaces, and guzzled fuel like a freighter. Because of this, the European Union banned the H1 Alpha from sale immediately after its release. Even in countries with laxer emission standards, the truck's dimensions posed issues. At over 86 inches wide without mirrors, it exceeded legal limits in several places. Its weight barred it from certain bridges, roads, and tunnels designed for lighter vehicles. Its turning radius was enormous, wider than many minibuses, making it ill-suited for urban streets. Environmentally, the H1 Alpha was a polluter, producing excessive nitrous oxide and particulate emissions. Ironically, the military's original M998 Humvee could sometimes be imported as surplus with fewer restrictions, provided it stayed off public roads. But the civilian H1 Alpha, brand new and far heavier, had no such exemptions. After just one model year, GM discontinued the Alpha due to rising costs, shrinking sales, and mounting regulatory pressures. Today, it remains a symbol of what happens when a vehicle built for war tries to adapt to civilian life. Too large, too dirty, and incompatible with modern cities and emissions laws. Number 12. The Lotus 340R, a track car banned as a road car. Picture a car so focused on performance that it barely qualifies as a conventional vehicle. Imagine a machine designed without doors, roof, or traditional bodywork, built to feel like a race car just barely allowed on the street. This was the Lotus 340R, a limited edition track-inspired sports car released in 2000, built to be driven hard, seen rarely, and often prohibited. Only 340 were made, a number integral to its name and exclusivity. Despite coming from Lotus, a British icon, the 340R was rejected as road legal in many countries. Its exposed wheels, minimal bodywork, lack of doors, and emissions profile clashed with regulations across Scandinavia, North America, and beyond. To grasp why, you must look at Lotus's uncompromising approach. The 340R was based on the ultralight Elise Series 1 chassis, but stripped down even further. It had no windshield, no doors, no roof, just an aluminum tub with exposed carbon fiber wheel arches that resembled the skeleton of a stripped-down prototype race car. Powered by a 1.8-liter Rover K-Series engine with variable valve timing and lightweight internals, the 340R produced about 177 horsepower. In a car weighing just 1,500 pounds, that translated to a lightning-fast 0 to 60 miles per hour in 4 seconds. However, its emissions equipment was minimal, lacking modern catalytic converters or diagnostics to meet emerging Euro 3 standards around 2000. Many countries refused road approval due to this alone. Safety was another critical issue. The car had no doors, no latches, no windshield wipers, minimal crash protection, and no rollover structure. Many jurisdictions require side impact protection even if doors are absent, but the 340R had none. Seatbelts were 4-point harnesses, not always legally approved, and exposed drivetrain parts made inspectors see it as more cart than car. In the US, Lotus never attempted homologation, so the 340R was never certified. Even in the UK, where it was sold, owners struggled with insurance and some questioned its road suitability. Lotus openly admitted the 340R was more of a weekend track toy than a practical street car, embracing its borderline legality. The 340R was a deliberate challenge to what defines a road vehicle, a raw, uncompromising machine that was banned in many places because it refused to conform. Number 13. The Ford RS200, rally legend lost to regulation. Few cars are as tightly linked to a racing class, and banned because of it, as the Ford RS200. Developed in the mid-1880s to compete in the notoriously dangerous Group B rally series, the RS200 was Ford's response to dominant competitors like Lancia and Audi. This mid-engine, turbocharged four-wheel drive machine barely resembled a typical road car. Although road-legal versions existed, the RS200's future was doomed when Group B was outlawed in 1986, ending the car's raison d'etre. The RS200 was a masterpiece of motorsport engineering. To enter Group B, manufacturers had to produce 200 homologation cars, nearly identical to their race vehicles. Ford designed the RS200 from scratch with a tubular frame by ex-Formula One engineer Tony Southgate. Its 1.8-liter Cosworth BDT turbo engine produced between 250 and 370 horsepower in street form with over 500 in competition trim. The car featured a sophisticated all-wheel drive system and near-perfect weight distribution for blistering pace. Ford delivered the 200 road-legal RS200 Evolutions in Europe, equipped with full interiors and necessary safety features, and these were legal to drive in the UK with appropriate insurance. However, the RS200 never gained federal approval in the US and was consequently banned on American roads. The ban coincided with a series of fatal crashes involving Group B cars, prompting the FIA to cancel the category outright. Without Group B, the RS200 lost its purpose, and Ford shelved the project. Despite its abrupt end, the RS200 remains an iconic collector's car, admired for its rawness and racing pedigree. In recent years, a few have reached the US under the 25-year exemption, finally legal but long after their heyday. The RS200 was a creation designed to meet a specific rulebook, and when that book was thrown away, so was the car's chance on the road. It wasn't banned for being faulty, but because the sport had grown too dangerous. Number 14. BMW M3 GTS, too raw for US streets. The BMW M3 GTS represents what happens when an automaker sheds all restraint. Built on the E92 M3 coupe, the GTS was a fiercely track-oriented machine, lighter, louder, and more aggressive than its standard counterpart. Despite its engineering brilliance, it was never allowed on American streets. BMW eventually stopped US certification, making the GTS a coveted factory race car barred from public roads. Launched in 2010, the GTS wasn't just a stripped-down M3, it was a radical rework. Its 4.0-liter V8 was stroked to 4.4 liters, pushing power to 440 horsepower from 414. The suspension became fully adjustable, ride height dropped, brakes upgraded, and weight was cut drastically.
It's got another 35 horsepower, a bigger engine.
Visually, it sported a fixed rear wing, side exhausts, and aerodynamic tweaks that generated genuine downforce. Built purely for speed, it shaved more than 30 seconds off Nürburgring lap times compared to the regular M3. With just 150 units sold in Europe at over 115,000 euros, it was both rare and handmade. Buyers understood it was too extreme for everyday driving and lacked certain safety and emission certifications. This extreme tuning proved problematic for US laws. Instead of re-engineering for a small American market, BMW pulled out of US certification completely. The GTS was officially off-limits, unregisterable, and uninsured for street use. Some enthusiasts imported them under track-only titles or converted them for racing, but no GTS was ever legally roadworthy in the US, not even under the 25-year classic car rule for decades. Frustration grew because less extreme M3 variants were allowed stateside, including competition packages and special editions. The GTS, despite being a factory product, was simply too radical for US regulators. For American fans, it remains an unfulfilled dream, a pure, naturally aspirated V8 manual track weapon that never officially made it to their roads. Number 15. The Mazda Cosmo 110S blocked over emissions. The Mazda Cosmo 110S, introduced in 1967, marked a major milestone in automotive history. It was the first production car globally to feature a dual-rotor Wankel engine. This was also Mazda's first genuine sports model, a bold step to place Japan on the technological map in the car world. Its design was striking, resembling a sleek European coupe with a long bonnet and a compact rear. Under the hood, it was innovative and groundbreaking. However, in the United States, the Cosmo 110S was banned, not due to safety concerns, but because it failed to meet emission standards. Mazda's journey began in the early 1960s when it acquired rotary engine technology from NSU, the German firm that developed the first practical Wankel engine. While other Japanese manufacturers stuck to small piston engines, Mazda saw an opportunity to leap ahead with a lightweight, high-revving rotary. The 10A engine was a 982 cubic centimeter dual-rotor unit capable of 110 horsepower at 7,000 revolutions per minute. An impressive output for its size at the time. Debuting at the 1964 Tokyo Motor Show, it went into production in 1967. But with just 1,176 cars made until 1972, it remained very rare. Mazda didn't initially aim for US sales, but some units were sent overseas for demonstration. Yet, once it tried to certify the Cosmo under the new US Clean Air Act of 1970, it faced an impossible barrier. The rotary engine inherently produced high levels of hydrocarbons and carbon monoxide, far exceeding new federal limits. The Cosmo lacked a catalytic converter and emissions control systems. Although redesign was possible, the cost was prohibitive for such a niche sports car. Consequently, the Cosmo was effectively banned on American roads from the start. Today, surviving models are prized collectibles, some legally imported under the 25-year exemption rule. But for decades, this pioneering rotary was a forbidden relic, banned by environmental regulation rather than danger.